I'm just going to give you a brief rundown.
Yes, and we're going to...
Yeah.
Finally, we're here in Florence Nightingale Museum. It's actually downstairs. You can walk from St. Thomas Hospital. See you there. Hi lads, I'm here in Florence Nightingale Museum and we're going to have a tour, just a quick tour so you'll know our nursing profession and of course the author of our nursing job who is Florence Nightingale. And I'm here with Melissa and she will give us a very quick tour about the MOP. Yes, and let's meet Melissa. Go.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Yep, I'm just going to give you a brief rundown of the museum itself, and then I'll let you go in and explore. So the museum itself is divided up into 3 distinct sections based on time period in Florence's life. The green section in the front is all about her early life, so her birth up until her first job on Harley Street. The Turkish tile section is all about her time during the Crimean War. It's also where her lamp is located, so everyone always looks at that as well. And then the brownish beige section in the back is all about her later life, especially her work with the Royal Statistical Society. And we also have a recreation of her final bedroom in the back as well. And we always have 2 temporary exhibitions that are up at any time, and they're constantly changing.
Yes, and now we have for the quick tour of the museum. So I'm here with Laura. Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
So the first item you see when you arrive at the museum is this beautiful bust of Florence Nightingale. Now this bust is very special because it actually had sign-off from her family as being the closest representation of what she actually looked like. So we were incredibly proud to have it here right at the entrance of our space. So we've arrived at our first section, the green hedges, about Nightingale's early life, and I'm going to show you some of my favourite objects, so come on inside. So Florence Nightingale was born in 1820 and from a very young age she loved learning. So we've got some of her sort of learning resources, her books and collections about the natural world. She was an incredibly intelligent child, particularly when it came to mathematics. So the usual education a girl might receive from a governess, things like elocution and dancing, didn't satisfy Nightingale. Her father actually taught her herself. My favourite object in this case is actually her shell collection at the bottom. She absolutely loved the natural world around.
Yes, and we're going to see Florence's favorite owl, and we don't know that she has her, favorite pet. So, Laura.
So this is our star object of this section. Florence Nightingale actually had a pet owl, as some of you, as you know. She actually found this owl when she was in Greece. There was a group of young boys who were all kicking at something on the ground and she wasn't happy with that. So she shooed them away, rescued the owl and kept it safe as a pet. And this is the real owl as well. It was taxidermied when it passed, which is how we have it here today.
Okay, so we're going to see Florence Nightingale's travels.
Nightingale was very well travelled. In fact, her parents sent her off on these holidays to try and distract her from wanting to be a nurse. She went all through Europe and she spent a very long time in Egypt as well. So in the case over here, we've got some of the objects that she brought back from these travels. Things like perfumes, snake skins, and even a sail that she made for her boat as she crossed the River Nile.
Yeah, so we're going to see the Crimean War and yeah, what's Florence's participation in that. And specifically, we know that Crimean War, we know that that's the birth of nursing, and we go further on that and see what's really the whole story of the Crimean War. Okay.
So Florence Nightingale was actually asked to help in the Crimean War. Things were not going particularly well for the British soldiers, and the hospital conditions were particularly bad. It is suggested by some that she wasn't actually asked to go to the war, she was just asked to help from afar, but that's not her style. She gathered a team of nurses and they travelled off to go and help. Although not all nurses were created equally, and this ledger explains all the times that they misbehaved. In fact, some nurses were actually sent home for inappropriate behaviour. So this is our star object of this section, the lamp, of course. Many know Florence Nightingale as the lady with the lamp, but not many expect it to look like this. A lot of our visitors are looking out for an oil lamp or a genie lamp, forgetting of course that Miss Nightingale was actually working in what is modern day Turkey. So the only type of lamp that she could get was a traditional Turkish lamp. This style is called a fanus, and it would have been lit with a candle inside, so it would have required a very steady hand. So could be a potential fire hazard should you trip over a rat or slip in a pool of blood.
I don't know that Florence likes turtle as well. I was thinking, oh, what does it has to do with nursing? So we'll see.
So Florence Nightingale obviously loved her pet owl, but she realised that a small pet is often an excellent companion for the sick. In fact, she wrote that in Notes on Nursing. So the soldiers got their very own pet. This is Jimmy the tortoise. This is his actual shell, and he was a ward pet, purely there to cheer the soldiers up.
The nurses now wear the scrub suits and also other type of suit, you know, for nursing job. And what's really a code of nursing uniform, you know, when Florence Nightingale was living the time, and what's really the right uniform, so will be more professional and dignified, you know, in the way we work.
So Florence Nightingale realised a uniform would be really important for her nurses. It meant the soldiers would be able to see them, tell they were a nurse, and could get the help when they needed. So she actually introduced a uniform for her nurses at Scutari Hospital. It didn't come easy though. They had to make this uniform themselves. So you see this red and cream sash here. They'd have had to sew and embroider them and then wear them throughout their shifts. So this is considered one of the first ever nursing uniforms.
Yes, Laura. So what's the uniform during Florence Nightingale's time, especially, you know, when she's a student?
So when she came back from the war, she eventually opened her training school, and the students that came got this rather marvellous uniform here. The sleeves are called leg of mutton sleeves because they look like a big leg of lamb, and it's not the most practical outfit, all the way to the floor, very tight waist, but again it meant that their patients would recognise them as a nurse and knew who to ask for help.
Yeah, so we know that Florence Nightingale did nursing and she's the author of it, and how come she loves it and then eventually she lead other people, especially the nursing students, what led her to do nursing further, and so people will really know that really need this kind of job and work.
So when Florence Nightingale came home from the war, she was actually incredibly unwell. She went to her bedroom and supposedly stayed there for 11 years. But in this time, she started to write. She'd learnt so much while she was away, and she wanted other people to understand the differences she'd made and the importance of nursing. She wrote almost 15,000 letters and over 200 books and pamphlets. And eventually she went on to open the Nightingale Training School to train the next generation of nurses.
Yeah, we passed by before the St. Thomas Hospital, and I was thinking, you know, because it's just they have a vacancy, you know, room here so they can have the museum, but what's really the correlation between the St. Thomas Hospital and the Florence Nightingale Museum?
So we are here for a reason. St Thomas's is a very important hospital to Florence Nightingale. In fact, she helped design the hospital. She was consulted when it was built, and she chose it as the place for her nurse training schools. The first Nightingale nurses trained at St Thomas's Hospital, and the training school stayed here until 1996. So one of the reasons that Florence Nightingale was listened to and was so successful was her love of mathematics. She used evidence in everything that she put forward and really pioneered evidence-based healthcare. Now, the graph I'm standing on here is probably her most famous. It's called the polar area chart, sometimes known as the cock's cream or the rosebud, and this was her way of showing what was happening at Scutari Hospital. The causes of death. So I'm standing on one of Florence Nightingale's most famous charts. This was part of her pioneering evidence-based care, and this shows how the soldiers were dying at Scutari Hospital, with the large kind of turquoise area showing those dying of disease, and the much smaller area, those dying of more common war-related causes. When she showed it to people in this way, it was very hard for them to ignore just how big the problem had been. So they started to listen to her suggestions for nursing and healthcare moving forward.
Yeah, and we'll see here Florence bedroom, and she also have the voice there, so we can listen again. So yeah, so we can listen to her voice, and yeah, that's good. At least we can see listen, to her real voice and making her alive again. Yes, so we press this button, and yeah. Yeah, and we can see also Florence's favorite fragrance. So this is the perfume that she's using, and she likes white rose and night scented jasmine. And we still have here in the shop, so if you want to buy also when you visit the museum, so that will be great. Yeah, and we also see on the museum the graduate nurses, and I'll show you them. It's very quick, and it will be nice if you come here to the museum so you can see all the details. Yeah, so on this section we can see the Victorian era. It's a time when Florence Nightingale developed nursing, as well as the further development of the science and also the healthcare system overall in general. Yeah, in this picture we can see the pictures of the soldier during the Crimean War. Yeah, we can also see here the Book of Honor, and it's great because for all the nurses working abroad all over the world, and it's great that we can commemorate them or remember their work in the nursing profession. Yes, so how will I look if I wear the Florence Nightingale uniform? Let's see. We can see here nursing fashion that time. We can see the transitions of the nursing uniform during the time. So from this style and this one. Present uniform that we're using now in our generation, Crimean soldiers. Yes, and we can see here the stove that was used before during the Crimean War. And that time the soldiers were very hungry, and Alexis Sawyers started the culinary, and he helped a lot Florence Nightingale during that time to feed the soldiers. Sort of forceps used to remove the bullets during the Crimean War. Yeah, and we'll see here also in Florence Nightingale Museum the collections. Evie's here with us and she'll explain the details about the collection.
Okay, so this is one of our Victorian object collections. So we have a lot of different artifacts here. So we'll start with this one over here. This one is unfortunately a chamber pot, and it was used for, toilet stuff. And sometimes it would unfortunately get thrown out the window, which is very unfortunate. But this is a replica, not a real one, don't worry. This is a replica of Florence Nightingale's writing slate. We actually have a real one in the hedges behind me. And it was given to her on one of her birthdays by her mother. And she obviously scribbled a lot of her mathematic equations on here. So that's always a cool image. This right here, this very little small thing, is actually a scent holder. So London was very smelly, and the miasma theory came into fashion where smells cause diseases. So people would walk around with one of these under their nose and it would have a nice smell, and it would stop people from inhaling nasty germs. Now, these are to do with Florence writing. So this is an inkwell that Florence would use in her house, and her owl Athena would dip her beak in and make quite a mess. And this is one that she would use on the go, so it's nice and protective on a carriage ride, for instance, with also one of these lovely little nib pens to write over 15,000 letters. This is one of my favourite objects. I get a lot of interesting guesses with this. So this is actually a purse. So this is what's known as a miser's purse. So you would slip your coins in here and you would seal it up like that. And women would put them in their skirts and men would have them up their sleeves so they couldn't be robbed, or also if they didn't want to spend any money. So this here is wax that you would melt under a candle, and you would put it on a letter that you wanted to seal, and you would press down and seal it with one of these little stamps as well.
Yes, so before we exit the Florence Nightingale Museum, of course, we always want to have souvenirs. So they have all kinds of souvenirs here, from bags, pens, books. They also have books here, and they also have mugs, pair of socks, museum, and they have cards, keychains, or other scent that Florence Nightingale used during her time. So they also have here the white jasmine, and yeah, this one, and also they have lip balm and vanilla and rose, tea towel, and it's nice to have it also in your kitchen. It's a great and amazing tour here in Florence Nightingale Museum. Especially, you can see also the details of the history of Florence, aside from her being a nurse, and also her personal life, and also the pets, everything, from the uniforms, and of course how she developed nursing, and along the years, she was able to, to train also the nurses along the way.